Don't listen to the tapes. That's the strange voicemail message Gilbert's brother leaves him right before Aunt winds up in the hospital with unexplainable injuries. Despite the warning, when Gilbert finds Aunt's bag filled with 3 cassette tapes and a Walkman, he can't help but play the tapes and listen to the chilling stories they reveal. Tales of cursed seashells, of cemeteries that won't let you leave, of a classroom skeleton that hungers for new skin. And wandering through all the stories is a strange man named November, who might not be a man at all. This is a preview of More Tales to Keep You Up at Night by Dan Poblocki. Gilbert Campbell was shelving books at the public library on the Upper West Side when his phone dinged. One new voicemail. His brother's message was garbled, mixed with static, but Gilbert was able to make out. Tell you, important, whatever you do, don't listen to the tapes. Explain more when I... This was followed by about 30 seconds of a soft hissing. Gilbert played the message again, then again. Was there panic in Aunt's voice, or did it only sound that way because the recording was messed up? It was the week of winter break. Holiday festivities had come and gone. Gilbert and his best friend, Percy, had been planning on playing video games and catching up on their favorite shows, but he hadn't thought to ask Mrs. Effiong for time off. A bummer, since this particular library was up by their school and nowhere near home. His mom and dad were away on vacation, and Grandma Rosemary was visiting. This wasn't a bad thing. Grandma Rosemary didn't mind TV binging or video games. In fact, she often joined in. The problem was that whenever their grandmother looked after them, Gilbert's older brother tended to act out. Whatever you do, don't listen to the tapes, Aunt had said. Which tapes? Gilbert wondered. Before returning the call, he noticed that Aunt's message was from early that morning, before dawn, but it had only just arrived. Weird. The line rang and rang. Shivering, he returned to the shelving cart, deciding to grill Aunt later. Since his shift was nearly done, only 3 books were left. The Secret of the Stone Child by Nathaniel Olmsted, The Clue of the Incomplete Corpse by Ogden Kentwall, and something called Elsewhere Gardens by an author named October Bowen. This last one he handed to Mrs. Effiong across the counter. I'd like to check this out before I go. It's for my best friend. Percy was a self-proclaimed botanist in training. Once they'd said, "What in the world is more hopeful than a garden?" Gilbert loved that. Mrs. Effiong's big brown eyes glinted as she scanned the copy into his account. Gilbert's phone dinged again. A message from Percy. Their ears must be burning. My mom wants to know if you can come over for pizza later. Gilbert typed back. Sure, I'd love to have pizza with your mom. Will you be there too? Har har. Mrs. Effiong tissed as she slid the book back to him. Gilbert, you know I don't like our volunteers on their phones. I just have to check in with my grandmother. I'll be quick. When Gilbert pulled up Grandma Rosemary's contact info, the phone buzzed in his hand. She was calling. Ignoring Mrs. Effiong's frown, he swiped to answer, to say something about the cheerful coincidence. But his grandma sounded frantic. Where have you been? I've called and called. Service is spotty at the library. What's wrong? It's Antonio. His brother's strange voicemail crackled through Gilbert's memory. Is he okay? Do I sound like he's okay? Grandma Rosemary sighed. I'm sorry, sweetheart. It's just, he got hurt. How hurt? We're in intensive care. Please come. She told him the hospital name. The entrance is by the river. A map of the city flashed through his frazzled mind. I'll catch the bus. I have to get in touch with your parents. There was a click. She'd hung up. Everything all right? Mrs. Effiong asked. Gilbert felt like he was floating. His skin had gone all prickly. He thought of Aunt's face, his bulbous nose, stubborn acne, dark fuzz on his chin, curly black hair that faded to the skin just over his ears. Then Gilbert's brain did a frightening thing. It covered Aunt's face in red, wet and sticky, like in horror movies. Gilbert? Mrs. Effiong's voice came again. What's the matter? Gilbert clutched the counter's edge, then slipped Percy's botanical book under his arm. My brother, there was an accident. I have to go. Mrs. Effiong's hand drifted toward her mouth. Is there someone I can call? My grandmother wants me at the hospital. Gilbert's voice sounded as if it belonged to someone else. And my parents are... Let me give you cash for a cab. I have a Metro card. I'm not sure I feel comfortable. I'll be fine. Promise. He retrieved his coat and scarf and hat from the chair behind the circulation desk. You have my cell number? The librarian asked. Strange how those were the words that should make his eyes sting. I do, he answered, fighting to look all business. Text me when you get where you're going. An accident. Intensive care. Big brother. He shook the thoughts away, then tossed a nod to Mrs. Effiong. If he stood there any longer, he knew he'd break. At the landing, he pushed the door open. Cold air rushed into the library like a gasp. And this has been a preview of More Tales to Keep You Up at Night.